Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of fantasyfootball.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Wednesday, July 22nd, and we have an exciting preview episode for you tonight. We have got the quarterbacks and running backs of the exciting NFC East. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Ben, I'm doing okay. Just a ho-hum episode here at Fantasy Foresight. I don't know if any of these guys are really worth discussing, but, I'm going to suck it up. We're going to get through this together and, move on to the next division. That's probably more interesting. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
Jay.
That's right, Steve.
I'm kidding. It's the NFC East, baby. Let's go. We're getting some real football tonight.
Nice.
Some real players. Let's do this. Woo!
There we go. I'm doing great, guys. As always, happy to be on. And, I'm sorry I missed you Saturday. I do appreciate that you guys, plugged a few of my little, stats and nuggets, about the red zone goal line targets. But to that point, for anybody listening, definitely head out to fantasyfootball.com. Check out the Foresight Encyclopedia tab. I have the entire write-up done for the entire NFC East. So a lot of good information there.
I'm glad somebody plugged Steve's blog.
For sure, just like last time. We got you, Steve-O.
Hey, as T.O. would say, I love me, so me.
Hey, we're glad to have you back, Steve-O, especially tonight because Jay has already called a shot on Twitter. He's feeling combative. He's feeling argumentative, and we need that unbiased third party to, set everybody straight, hold everybody accountable, and make sure the craziness doesn't go off the rails.
I make no promises.
Oh yeah, no, that's why again, Steve, we're glad you're here, buddy. All right, so we're gonna dive right in. We are going to do reverse order once again. Started off with the exciting running backs, finish it off with the quarterbacks.
Wait. You're not gonna let me take this guy? I
No.
can't believe this.
Nah, you don't. You'll get your chance. You'll get your chance. But first up in order, first off, before we jump right into it, just a reminder, all of our ADP information is in 12-team PPR redraft format according to fantasyfootballcalculator.com. Whenever we are talking about fantasy finishes, we are talking about weeks 1 through 16 in full PPR formats from fantasypros.com. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in, and we are going to go in order of ADP, all the running backs in the NFC East, and then all the quarterbacks in the NFC East. And first up on that list, going as RB2 at the 102, is New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley, Jay's favorite. The New York Giants only have the 26th of 32 strength of schedule at the running back position, and they don't have that great of an offensive line either, according to Pro Football Focus. They only have the 20th ranked offensive line. And, Saquon right now is going only behind CMC, in front of Zeke Elliott and Alvin Kamara. His 2020 projection is PPR running back 2. His total Foresight ranking is RB3. Now, we have a 2-year sample size on Saquon now, and in last season, he was RB6 in fantasy points per game, and in his rookie campaign, he was RB4 in fantasy points per game. Now, keep that in mind, though, because he was going as the 101 last year, if I remember correctly, and he did miss those 3 games. He gave you 200 attempts and 911 yards, 4.6 yards per carry average, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Now, he added 49 receptions on 69 targets for another 413 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns at an 8.4 yard per reception clip. His notable stat ranks, he was 11th in RB1 percentage and RB2 percentage when he was on the field. He was 7th in consistency, 16th in consistency weeks 10 to 16, 3rd in Foresight consistency, and 6th in runs greater than 20 yards. The most surprising notable next-gen stat that I found on Saquon was that he actually faced the 8th least percentage of 8+ defensive fronts. I would have thought like a running back like Saquon would have been, the 8th most percentage of 8+ defensive fronts. And then from playerprofiler.com, I was, pleasantly surprised to see he was number 6 in yards created with 501 yards. So, despite that lackluster offensive line, it still shows you that Saquon does a really good job of creating his own production at times. So here's the thing. Saquon is one of the most surefire running back ones available in fantasy football. However, at the very top of the draft, you have to split hairs. And though it is slight, Saquon demonstrated a small injury risk last season. Plus, 2020 presents the added unknown of how Jason Garrett's play calling will affect that New York Giants offense as their new offensive coordinator. But hey, at least we know there will be a lot of clapping. But in all seriousness, Saquon is a high-end running back worthy of high-end draft equity. But for me, at the 102, that's just slightly too high for me this season.
So it's really interesting, guys. When I was putting together some of the stuff for the piece I wrote up this week, I was utterly stunned that the New York Giants ran the ball 35.8% of the time last season, which ranked 30th in the NFL. Given several factors that should just never happen. You have Saquon Barkley. I know he missed a few games, but you have Saquon Barkley. Oh, you're starting a rookie quarterback. Oh, your receiving core is in and out of the lineup all year. What is going on here? Now, goodbye, Mike Shula. You are no longer the OC in New York. Hello, Jason Garrett. Now, there's definitely some things that we could nitpick when it comes to Jason Garrett. However, I have seen what a DeMarco Murray has done with him. I've seen what Zeke has done with him. I think it is a major upgrade for Saquon Barkley. Because I'll tell you what, guys, Saquon last season, when it came to his red zone and goal line production, it didn't really exist. Why he wasn't getting the ball more down there, I don't know. 28 red zone carries for 3 touchdowns. He only got the ball 7 times in goal line situations. I understand that he missed 3 and probably 3.5, 3 3/4 games. Those numbers, even if you extrapolate that out, he's still like a bottom dweller in the NFL. And there's no excuse for that because he's Saquon Barkley. So I hear everything you're saying, Ben, and I agree. But, man, I think that things will benefit having Jason Garrett as their OC. I can't see it going anywhere but up anyways.
All right. Is it my turn?
It's all you, brother.
All
Go
right.
get him.
As much as I like to joke about Saquon and have some fun, ribbing him a little bit, being a Buckeye myself, I came into this really with an open mind because in the back of my mind, like Ben said, there was that injury risk creeping up last season, and I really wasn't sure, just because the last few seasons in Dallas and the frustration that Zeke owners had at times with Jason Garrett at the helm, I didn't know how that was going to translate over to New York with Saquon at the helm. And seeing some of the stats, like you mentioned, Ben, offensive line isn't great. Obviously an elite running back, but, when you're drafting the number 1 overall or number 2 overall running back, 16th most efficient north-south runner, which I know isn't necessarily his game. He likes to get wide, and he also likes to catch balls out of the backfield. He had 911 yards last year, despite missing 3 games, as it's been noted. So I thought, okay, since they were near the last in the league in rushing attempts, they made up for that in passing out of the backfield. Well, he had 49 catches on 69 targets. I mean, that's not... 400 yards for a running back is a great complimentary piece, and it is over 1,300 all-purpose yards. But again, Ben, like you said, at the top of the draft, we're splitting hairs. And there are some question marks there. Elite runner, absolutely. One of the top group. But for me, I'm probably going a different direction if I'm in the spot to take Saquon or possibly the guy who we're going to cover next, just because of some of those things. Durability. I question the coaching staff, the line, what they're going to do. But Steve, you kind of brought me back with the the possibility for progression in red zone targets, goal line carries, and those things that can really add on to an already elite talent. So, again, I'm still a little bit split on Saquon, and I'm really trying to take emotion out of it.
Well, Jay, number one, I'm very encouraged and surprised to hear how open-minded and reasonable you're sounding tonight. So good job, buddy.
I've grown quite a bit, Ben.
And it's only taken 14 episodes this season. But Steve, you made a great point about Jason Garrett. I researched the quarterbacks last in this episode, and so I have it freshest in my mind that I think Jason Garrett is going to have a negative impact on Daniel Jones and all the hype there. But to your point about Saquon, I agree. You look at the DeMarco Murray days, you look at the characteristics of Jason Garrett's offense when he was the OC, when he was the play caller, very run heavy, doesn't get cute around the goal line. So you're absolutely right. In the grand scheme of things, Saquon Barkley is a fine running back. But at the 102, I think we all agree that the guy that Jay's about to kick us off with is somebody that we would be taking ahead of Saquon.
Yeah, let's get to a real running back now, shall we, guys? Former Buckeye Ezekiel Elliott next on our list, and for some absurd reason going behind Saquon Barkley in drafts. I think we need to check our calculator that we're checking on that and make sure that we're right. Right now, Zeke is going behind CMC and Saquon as RB3 overall at the 104, going in front of Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook. Now, Dallas's their strength of schedule for running back is 24th out of 32 teams. So, tough sledding for the running back position for Dallas this season, but they do have the third-ranked offensive line. And again, it is Zeke. So a little bit to counterbalance that difficult strength of schedule. Now, his price currently matches his projection perfectly. He's projected to be RB3 this season. Total Foresight has him ranked as RB2. Thank you. That's exactly where he belongs. Glad to see Total Foresight getting it right. Now, his fantasy finishes over the last 3 years. RB3, RB7, RB5. Gotta love it. Nice, high-end, smack dab, RB1. Last season, he did not miss a game. Like, that's any question at this point for the Iron Man Ezekiel Elliott. He had 283 attempts, not even over the 300 attempt mark, for 1,235 lovely rushing yards for a 4.4 yard average and 11 scores. He also actually tacked on 51 catches for 66 targets for 418 yards and a score. Now wait a minute.
I knew you were going to catch on to this, that Zeke had more receptions on fewer targets than Saquon. I knew it.
I thought Saquon was the guy who was this big pass catcher, dynamic player on the backfield. What? What are we talking about?
Games, you
How
knucklehead.
is Zeke being drafted after? This is absurd. I don't even need to read the rest of these stats. But I'm going to, because Ben worked so hard at preparing all this information.
Yeah, I was just saying, if you don't, I will.
All right. Zeke was some notable 2019 stat ranks. He was 4th in RB1 percentage, which means only 3 players finishes as an RB1 more times during the season. He was 2nd in RB2 percentage and 3rd in consistency. He was 3rd in consistency weeks 10 through 16 and 2nd in Foresight consistency. That equals elite. Now, he was I mentioned before. Let's compare this too, Ben. Saquon was the 16th most efficient north-south runner. What was Ezekiel Elliott? 7th. Boom. Thank you. Better. What are we doing with this price going behind Saquon in drafts? He was tied for 18th in yards per attempt. He was number 1 in red zone touches, Steve-O. Was 68. Sorry to steal a little bit of your thunder there. You know what? I'm going to leave some of this to Steve, because a lot of these he may cover. Because he was elite in goal line carries. He was 10th in evaded tackles. 10th in dominator rating, 27% of his total team yards and touchdowns. Ben just mentioned Saquon's slight injury risk. and how you have to split hairs at this point in the draft in an effort to minimize risk. You want to talk about durability and as safe of a bet at the RB position as you can get? Well, look no further than Ezekiel Elliott. Proud to be a Buckeye, baby. He hasn't even been on an injury Get this. Hold on. I gotta.
Yeah.
Let me adjust my. Hold on. I'm gonna take a little drink here.
I think Jay's the super durable one over there.
Bring it in close. Ezekiel Elliott has not been on the injury report since the preseason. Huh? Of 2016. Guys, it's 2020. What?
My man.
And he's a running back. What? Steve,
man,
it can't get any more rosy than this, but I'm going to kick back and relax and assume that you're going to give me some lovely data that just further shows that Ezekiel Elliott is the true RB2 overall in fantasy.
Well, Jay, I have to say you did quite a fine job of doing that yourself.
Thank you.
But I'll pepper in a couple of things. So you alluded to him having, tops in the NFL in red zone touches. Not only did he lead the NFL in red zone carries with 59, which, he turned into 11 touchdowns, but he did lead his team in red zone targets. We'll talk about that more probably down the line when it comes to Dak and you guys when we talk about the receiving core of the Dallas Cowboys. But that is definitely interesting to note. And I mean, yeah, guys, I wanted to say, I thought about it earlier this afternoon. I'm like, you know what? I think that we are just going to have to start calling every time the Dallas Cowboys are within the 20-yard line, we just call it the Zeke zone.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely. He owns that part of the football field. And this is a team that, they were the top-ranked offense, yards per game last season. I can't imagine them having a high drop-off from that. The only thing that might hold them back a little bit is they already had a top 10 defense. They brought in – if you look at the ads they had in free agency and through the draft, that defense should be sick next season. So worst case scenario, maybe they aren't 7th in the NFL in plays per game, but maybe they do still run the ball a little bit more and they have to salt away and ice away a few more games. So there's just, all that. And obviously his history, I brought up the stuff I did about Saquon because I was kind of trying to paint a picture of there is the upside. There's a path to him finishing as the RB1 because we've seen it in a Jason Garrett offense before. But, I mean, if you give me my pick between the two, I mean, obviously I have to take the known, just bankable commodity that is Ezekiel Elliott in a great offense. You want running backs that are in sensational offenses, and I can't call the New York Giants that, at all right now.
Steve,
no, you can't.
But Ben, before you go real quick, Steve, not to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious. Zeke was number 1 in red zone touches with 68. Do you know who number 2 was and how big that margin was? I'm just curious. And if you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine. Maybe we can follow up at a later time and throw it up on Twitter after this.
No, I can tell you that certainly number 2 is Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
Which probably won't come as any kind of a surprise for anybody.
No,
the exact margin, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it's going to be really close. But yeah, I mean, you're talking 1A, 1B, and again, talk about those two guys in fantasy football. That's what you want on your team.
Okay, and how many red zone touches did Saquon have last year?
Yeah, in totality, 35.
Okay,
and
that's about half.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's only in 3 fewer games. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, if you extrapolate the numbers out, it's not comparable. But I do think that will change in a better way for Saquon next season. But
I agree totally. I would take Zeke over Saquon. It's CMC, Zeke, Saquon for me all day. And there's a lot of outstanding stats when it comes to Zeke. But when it comes to the top of your draft, and you talk about how you can lose your draft in the first round a lot easier than you can win your draft in the first round, it really comes down at the running back position specifically to durability. And when you talk about Zeke, a running back that has the volume of touches that he has, to not have been on the injury report since the preseason 4 years ago is absurd. And as we spoke about a few episodes ago, the fact that Zeke has already tested positive for COVID and the fact that it's been known that he's been asymptomatic, I almost feel like that gives him a leg up on everybody else in the NFL heading to the year.
He may be the only one playing this fall.
I mean, hey, it'll be a lot easier for him to score touchdowns if that's the case. But, the fact of the matter is he's just as durable as it gets. He's as productive as it gets. He's in as good of a situation as you could ask for between that line, the continuity of the offensive coordinator staff sticking around with Mike McCarthy's transition, and just that offense in general. So it's all there for Zeke this year. We're all on the same page as far as that's concerned. Another guy that I'm guessing will probably be on the same page about as well is Philadelphia Eagles running back, second-year running back Miles Sanders. He is currently going as the RB9 at the 111 behind Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb and in front of Joe Mixon and Kenyon Drake. The strength of schedule for the running backs of Philadelphia is actually ranked 23rd out of 32 teams, but they have the 10th best offensive line in the NFL. The projection for Miles Sanders is right on par with his ADP at RB9. Total Foresight likes him as RB18, very analytics driven and only really looking at what he did last year, not necessarily accounting for the fact that was including half a season of Jordan Howard, which is absolutely no more. He finished with Jordan Howard there half the season as RB20 in points per game, a fine rookie year, didn't miss any time, touched the ball 170 times on the ground, converted that into 766 yards and 3 touchdowns and a 4.5 yards per carry average. He added 47 receptions on 58 targets for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air at an average of 10.9 yards per reception. This guy was hyper efficient whenever he touched the ball. So an uptick in volume means very good things in fantasy land. Like I said, he was actually, that's not right. So as far, what's that?
Make it up.
Make it up. RB13 in fantasy points. No, he was RB20 in fantasy points. So you know what? RB13 in fantasy points in 2019, RB20 in fantasy points. Yeah, never mind. That's just wrong. So we'll have to confirm. I don't know. RB20 or RB13. One of those two. We'll figure it out. As far as his notable next-gen stats, he faced the 9th least percentage of 8+ defensive fronts, and he was 17th in yards per attempt. As far as playerprofiler.com goes, he was number 5 in juke rate, number 15 in yards created, 13 in evaded tackles, and 17 in red zone touches. Sorry, Steve-O. From weeks 1 through 9, while Jordan Howard was still playing for the Eagles, Miles finished as RB9 twice and RB22 one other time. So that was 3 good games out of 9 tries. However, after the bye, from week 11 on, without Jordan Howard in the mix, he had finishes of RB6, RB3, RB7, and RB19 in just 6 weeks. So that's 4 good games out of 6 weeks. You're going from 33% to 67%. And as the primary guy in that offense heading into 2020, he will see a significant increase in that volume he saw last year. So if that efficiency holds, he is in for a massive 2020 campaign.
Come on, Steve, don't break my heart.
Oh, I certainly won't. So,
yes.
It's funny, fellas. Miles Sanders, I feel like he's somebody I've been seeing like the hype train going full steam ahead pretty much since the conclusion of the 2019 season. And I haven't been like on board or off board. I've just been kind of like, I don't necessarily see it, but I also hadn't looked that closely into it. And, very interesting hearing a lot of the stats that Ben just provided for us. And, when I start looking at like the Eagles, for instance, they averaged as many plays as anybody in the entire NFL on a per game basis last season, tied with the Baltimore Ravens. Did not know that. Now, while I know Philadelphia, they had a lot of key offseason acquisitions on the defensive side of the ball, namely Darius Slay from Detroit, 3-time Pro Bowl cornerback, should help their team. Jay, I'm sure you're excited about that. Exactly. I do think that number is going to drop. However, when I started, that's still a good thing. They're not going to drop tremendously. But then when I started looking at, well, you had Jordan Howard with 22 red zone carries, 8 goal line carries, taking up 6 touchdowns in that part of the field. And even Boston Scott had 12 red zone carries, 4 for 4 on the goal line. And if you add all that up, there's 59 carries there in the red zone. And, I started looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, well, obviously Jordan Howard's out of the picture. I think a lot of the reason that the Eagles didn't draft another running back, they didn't bring anybody notable in from free agency, is they like what they saw out of Boston Scott. And that's great. I think he's going to be a nice piece there. But if you're going to tell me that Miles Sanders will get 65, 70% share of the backfield and Boston Scott, maybe another ancillary piece, gets like the rest of it, sign me up all day for Miles Sanders, especially given his skill set as a pass catcher. I mean, he did get double-digit red zone targets too last season, and that was with him not even really being in like a main role until the latter half of the season. So there's a lot to like there.
Jay, before you get going, I have to clarify. It was driving me nuts. Here's the thing. I just can't read my own writing. I didn't even make a mistake. I just didn't read it right. He was RB13, Miles Sanders, overall in fantasy points and RB20 in fantasy points per game in 2019.
Gotcha. Well, like Steve said, there's a lot to love. What can you not like about Miles Sanders? The only thing I don't really like Steve said, the hype train's rolling along, and usually when it's a guy on your team, you're like, all right, finally getting some love around here. And then you're like, whoa, price tag's getting a little too steep. I liked it better when he was like in the early teens getting drafted, and now he's up to RB9 now. Should he be going behind somebody like Josh Jacobs? I think that's debatable right now. I think we reviewed Josh Jacobs and kind of talked about what we saw from him from an efficiency standpoint and going forward what these offenses may look like. So I could see him even moving up another spot. I love my boy Nick Chubb, but between the two, Miles Sanders was a guy I was definitely targeting, just hoping to get him at a better value. But like you guys said, I think it's well covered now. A lot to look forward to. I just hope now that he can live up to these sky-high expectations because they're only going up. And I just don't want... it could be a case, we see it all the time, where you have these sky-high expectations, a player doesn't quite hit it, then all of a sudden everybody jumps off the bandwagon and his price plummets next season. And if that's the case, more for me and you.
Well, Jay, I think this is one of those times where your sensibility is almost holding you back a little bit, because if it was any other team besides your own, I don't think you would have any problem seeing the path to success for Miles Sanders this year.
No.
All the numbers support it, man. This guy just needs more touches, and with more touches, he is going to do more damage. So even at that RB9 price, I understand it. Josh Jacobs is a fine running back, but he doesn't have any pass catching upside whatsoever. Nick Chubb, I'm in the minority, I think, on this podcast about Nick Chubb, as far as like, I am very, very leery of Kareem Hunt, because Nick Chubb's finishes the second half of the season, once Kareem Hunt was involved, was very different. Joe Mixon, you can make the argument that Joe Burrow is going to make this offense better. He's got great weapons around him, so Joe Mixon should benefit from that. And then we're all very high on Kenyon Drake. So I just think all in all, that is an extremely interesting 5 running back tier going from RB7 to RB11.
And I'd almost put Josh Jacobs possibly at the back of that group, to be honest with you guys.
Probably. But, I think we're all in agreement on that.
Ben, I am trying to be much more sensible this evening. Like I said, I have grown a lot through these podcasts. However, I am deeply offended that you reordered this the way that you did so that you get to cover the next guy, or that I have to cover
what? You know what? No. You know what? That's fair. Let's flip it up. I'll keep going, and I'll do the next guy, and then you can do the one after that. How's
We're
that?
all growing together. We're all growing together.
There we
Team
go.
Foresight.
But
Team Foresight.
Speaking of Team Foresight, I saw that Steve had a little something that he wanted to add on Miles Sanders before we move on. So you go right ahead, Steve-O.
Oh, no, not particularly about Miles Sanders, but just a comment towards this group: Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Kenyon Drake. We've talked about it before when we look at like bust rates of guys going in this range. And what does make it interesting is there are definite pros and cons to each guy, and I am almost guaranteed that probably only 2 of them will live up to where we're drafting them. But we're desperate for running backs who will get volume in fantasy football, so they're all going to go high, bottom of the first, top of the second round. So make or breaks your season, guys. Get every bit of information you can on these fellas.
Yeah. I didn't talk about it with the guys on the show here before we started this episode, so I'm making an executive decision here. Next up, we're going to call them the Washington Dysfunctionals, and we're going to first be discussing in order of ADP Darius Geis. He is currently going as RB34, a far cry from the top end of this division, going RB2, RB3, RB9, then all the way down at RB34, you have the first running back for Washington, and that's Darius Geis at the 705. He's currently going behind James White and J.K. Dobbins, and in front of Tevin Coleman and Jordan Howard. His strength of schedule for the running back position for Washington is 9th out of 32 teams, but Pro Football Focus only likes their offensive line as 29th out of 32 teams. His projection heading into 2020 is RB34. Total Foresight hasn't even ranked this guy yet, just because he has not met our minimum for analytics threshold. So we will be manually addressing that very soon. But as far as last season goes, he was RB28 in fantasy points per game. He only played in 5 games and had 42 attempts for 245 yards, 5.8 yard per carry average, and 2 touchdowns. Added another 7 receptions on 9 targets for 79 yards and a touchdown, 11.3 yards per reception. So already we're seeing a trend in a very short time with the limited touches, hyper efficient running back. And now I'll take that one step further. It's a very small sample size, but in his healthiest 3-week span in 2019, that was weeks 11 through 13. In that time, he was PPR running back 8. That surprised me. I did not know that. And again, it is a small sample size, so you got to take it for what it's worth. But even for what it's worth, it was surprising in a positive way for Darius Geis. And it keeps on going from there. I was shocked to find. PerPlayerProfiler.com, his best comparable based on all kinds of analytics about their workout size and efficiency on and off the field. His best comparable, according to that site, is Zeke Elliott. That surprised me. And then he was number 16 in dominator rating. While he was on the field, he was 25% of his team's total offensive yards and touchdowns when healthy. Now, Geis's injury risk and his injury history are very well documented. We all know that he has played in just 5 games and managed 1 start in 2 seasons. However, for the brief time he was on the field in 2019, we went through, check out these player profiler stats. I left 2 of them out for a reason, because these are his best 2. He was number 2 in yards created per touch. Number 2 overall. And then they also have this stat called production premium. Check this out. The production premium quote measures a player's productivity across league average situations and discounts non-standard situations such as garbage time or a 2-minute drill, end quote. Players with the strong production premium ranking are more efficient than the average full-time player in similar situations. And where did Darius Geis finish in that metric? Once again, number 2 overall. So I am somebody who is typically very risk averse. And when you talk about the running backs going around him, James White, J.K. Dobbins, Tevin Coleman, and my guy, Jordan Howard, there's a lot of guys on that list that I am taking before Darius Geis. But I will say, before I did the research for this podcast, I was somebody who thought you were straight out of your mind for even spending RB34 equity on him. Now, if that average draft position of 705 falls a round or 2 in your league, and all of a sudden you're talking about him in like the 8th or 9th round, I all of a sudden understand it very much.
Steve, I am so interested to hear what you have to say about the Sammy Watkins of running backs.
No, Ben, when you were talking through him, I was like, he didn't even register when it came to me researching him for red zone and goal line carries because, well, he hardly played.
Right.
So he just wasn't anywhere that was even like rankable. But I was like, well, I'll go ahead and take a look. So I was sitting here shaking my head because he had 2 goal line touchdowns, which is twice as many as Saquon Barkley in 2019. So, Jason Garrett.
Shots fired! That wasn't even me!
Help that.
I wonder where those came from.
Jason Garrett, help that man in fantasy football. But I did not, realize a lot of what you said, Ben. But it also makes sense because while I was never big on the Darius Geis hype train, even as a rookie, I know that there was a massive one, and even heading into last year, there was one. So, the talents there. We saw the picture of his thigh. What was it on Twitter and Instagram? Where it's as big as me. He obviously, if he could stay healthy and be on the field, he could certainly be of value in the 7th round. Hey, I'm usually bombing on a lot of those picks anyways. So, if you feel like that's a shot you want to call, go for it. I get it. But, Ben, a lot of what you said, I also was like, Ben, you sound insane. But as you kept going, I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm coming around a little bit.
And that's all I'm saying is that I went from thinking you were out of your mind if you took him even in the 8th or 9th rounds and being like, well, I get the upside now.
Well, yeah, and you can totally understand why Washington drafted him and what they thought he could be. You've seen it in flashes, but the injury part of it is just such a big factor because of how little he's been on the field the last 2 seasons. So, When I'm looking at an RB34 price tag in the 7th round, I think we're both kind of all hemming and hawing. Like, I understand that. Like, if that's the direction you want to go, that's probably an okay price because of the upside, because of that dynamic playmaking ability, but also that huge, enormous injury risk that's there. You certainly can't bank a starting spot on your roster really on him for season long. You really need to prepare for him not to be there for you. So as long as you're willing to address that, if he's going to be your RB2 or flex, okay, I get that, but you also need to have a backup plan in place in case it doesn't work out. He could be he could really be a league MVP for you if he hits and stays healthy.
And that goes along with the point that I was just about to make that, if you're all of a sudden looking at this group, James White, J.K. Dobbins, Tevin Coleman, and Jordan Howard, and Darius Geis, and you're telling me we're in a best ball draft?
Right.
All of a sudden, Darius Geis, after seeing these numbers, is at the top of my list in this group.
Yes.
But as it is well documented, I am planting my flag for Jordan Howard this season, and Jordan Howard is my undoubted guy in redraft in 2020 of those 5.
Yeah, and J.K. Dobbins would be your guy in Dynasty just because of the future potential he holds.
For sure.
And I mentioned Sammy Watkins in jest, but I feel like it's probably an appropriate comparison because Sammy did have some great seasons and some very prolific fantasy games.
And a great best ball player, too.
Yes, and very prolific fantasy games, but just the injuries continually hamper his ability, and it just burns you time and time again. And I know we're supposed to take emotion out of this, but when you get burned time and time again, at some point you have to learn that lesson about various players and just move in a different direction and let somebody else take that risk. Could that guy hit for somebody else? Sure, but it's an awfully big risk. Now, let's get to the real running back in this backfield. And everybody watching at home is like, really? You're that excited about AP? No, my friends. I'm excited about rookie running back Antonio Gibson, who is currently...
AG.
I was going to say, you had a perfect opportunity to go AG.
AG, oh yeah, AG, not AP, fools. All right, he is currently being drafted ahead of AP, which is interesting because he's currently listed as the 3rd running back on their depth chart. But in drafts, the hype train may be a small train. It may be moving a little bit slow, but it's definitely rolling along for the fact that he's actually being drafted before AP currently in fantasy football. He's going behind Kerryon Johnson and Chase Edmonds and in front of Tony Pollard and Darrell Henderson in the 10th round. So, again, a late guy, an early target for your bench, if you will, if you're in that type of format. His projection is RB51, right around his price tag. he does have 2 running backs that are ahead of him on the depth chart on this team. One is a seasoned vet. One is an oft-injured player that we just covered in Darius Geis. So he needs to get the opportunity. In college at Memphis, he had 38 catches for 735 yards for a 19.3 yards per reception average and 8 touchdowns. He had 33 carries for 369 yards for an 11.2 yards per carry average and 4 touchdowns. He had 1,104 total yards for a 15.5 yards per touch average. Dynamic. Okay, so you hear that big playmaker ability. The guy is 6 feet and 228 pounds. He's bigger, faster, and stronger than both Darius Geis and AP. Now you see why Washington drafted this guy. You know what they wanted out of Darius Geis. It just hasn't worked out. The guy can't stay healthy. Now they go and they spend pretty significant draft capital on another player who's also dynamic and who doesn't have the ouchie problem. So will he get an opportunity? In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, they drafted this guy to be their dynamic playmaker in that offense. This is a new regime in Washington, and they're the ones who drafted this beast in the 3rd round. Plus, he has a legit shot to lead this team in slot targets or take over the backfield entirely. And don't forget, he also returned kicks in college and scored touchdowns, my friends. Ron Rivera called this guy someone with CMC's skill set, but bigger. Come on, man. You gotta love all these things. I'm all in on Antonio Gibson. It could be that he doesn't even sniff the field this season, but I will be shocked and disappointed if he doesn't come in and really turn it on and become a fantasy stud this season.
So, and I wrote about it a little bit. Well, actually, a little bit's not right. Extensively in this week's write-up when it came to Washington's offense. And so at least my thought process is, I feel like throughout this season, there will be, especially when you think about the fact we know there's not going to be a preseason now. Who knows how the offseason will actually work out. I do think that now rookie running backs probably least of all the rookies, but there's definitely going to be a little bit of a setback for every rookie out there. And they have Adrian Peterson, who has been there. He is Adrian Peters. He's AP. But then I also looked at the fact that the Redskins, they were dead last in plays run, dead last in every red zone metric, running back, quarter, it doesn't even matter, everything. So when I think of the chance that this offense as a whole and these running backs are going to probably be some kind of a committee, I want to get excited about Gibson, and I was a lot more until I started looking at like all of the numbers. And I can just hope and I can pray that Ron Rivera and him bringing pretty much his entire staff up to DC with him from Carolina will hopefully pick that offense up as a whole, and Dwayne Haskins, because they need it, because that offense was downright putrid. The touchdown upside doesn't exist. But I do agree with what a lot of you guys are saying. Like I'm excited. Like he's one of those guys I'm like, man, I kind of wish he was in a different situation. I am happy to hear they view him as a CMC-like kind of a skill set player. But man, I just want to throw out there to everybody, man, Washington was putrid last season offensively.
You're trying to shower me with cold water, and it's not working. I'm still burning, man. Let's go. Antonio Gibson, breakout star.
Well, and I'm here to break the tie for you guys. And Steve, consider this. I mean, best case scenario, he takes over the backfield. But, even if AP and Darius Geis command the vast majority of the running back touches, there is a legitimate opportunity with him being a bona fide college wide receiver in
Okay.
Memphis,
Yes.
that he leads this team in slot targets in 2020
Okay.
and still be listed as a running back. So in full PPR formats, even if he doesn't find his way to leading that backfield in touches, I think his touches could then come through the air in a very short and high efficiency, high completion rate type of route tree that Dwayne Haskins has a higher probability of hitting.
Can you imagine? Oh, sorry, Steve.
I was going to say, and here's a little monkey wrench into that is, and I don't know how it's going to work out. It'll be interesting, but Steve Sims,
I know. Yeah.
But he produced. He caught every goal line target he had. He was better than Terry McLaurin in the red zone.
And I like him as a sleeper too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's a new regime, and we don't know how this goes. Yeah, so there's more than one path I see this season for Antonio Gibson to return on an RB48 number if he's going to get, maybe not lead. He could lead the He could have a 55-45 split over Sims. Who knows? Maybe they use Sims more all over the place than just the slot. But
could we agree on the possibility of people that might draft him in the 10th round might end up cutting him a couple of weeks in because the usage isn't there yet, because it's just
if their expectations are not calibrated, you're absolutely right.
And then you go out and you just pick him up for free.
Yeah.
And then he develops into something you're happy to use. I'm envisioning him more in that role just because of the offense, the older, there's pieces there that I think the season will start with. And there's people that'll be like 10th round upside. Oh, he didn't do anything for a couple of weeks and cut him.
Well,
sorry, I spent way too much time on Antonio.
I mean, you're right. It's all right. Day one, guys. Hall of Famer from day one. Now, listen, let me paint you a different picture. Do you remember all of the drama a couple seasons ago when I believe was it Ty Montgomery for Green Bay who they had to hyphenate his position between wide receiver and running back? Who was that? Do you remember all that? There was so much drama.
Steve, who is the guy that you got to play as a tight end who was a running back for Pittsburgh?
Jalen Samuels.
Well, there's Jalen Samuels last year. Was that last year or 2 years ago? And then there was a player for Green Bay who had the same situation.
No.
Couldn't you see a similar thing for Antonio Gibson, a guy who in college split his snaps almost evenly between rushing attempts and wide receiving or in catches, being a hyphenated player in fantasy football, which gives you some, albeit additional flexibility and value?
I mean, listen, he's going around handcuffs. Chase Edmonds, Tony Pollard, Darrell Henderson. He's not egregiously priced. He's going in that for running backs kind of dart throw range. When you're talking about RB48, that for me, as far as running backs go, that's dart throw city.
Right.
So, I don't know. I have some shares in Antonio Gibson. I think there is an opportunity for him to take over that backfield because he is an absolute beast. Like you said, Jay, he's bigger, faster, and stronger than the other two running backs in this backfield who are pretty fast and strong themselves.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting. But like Steve said, there's also this very unique dynamic where he's not getting to wow everybody in camp. He's not getting to have a bunch of preseason highlights. So for all we know, he's going to be faded just by lack of opportunity. And like Steve said, maybe we can get him on the waiver wire within the first couple of weeks of the season.
Well, good. And I hope that his price tag stays low. And I'm also happy that we spent 20 minutes talking about this guy because I'm so excited about seeing him this weekend. So it's fantastic. Win-win all around. All right, let's move on to the next guy who you mentioned and is being drafted just behind Antonio Gibson, the very next spot, and that is handcuff Tony Pollard, Zeke's handcuff. And in a season like this, when there's so many uncertainties, both with positive tests and with how this season's going to work out, handcuffs are going to become maybe more important this year than ever before. We could be burning through players. Who knows? And Tony Pollard being Zeke's handcuff is certainly an elite one. Like I said, he's being drafted just behind Antonio Gibson and Chase Edmonds at RB49 in the middle of the 10th round. He's going in front of Darrell Henderson and Duke Johnson. The Cowboys, as we mentioned when we covered Zeke, have the 24th best or 8th worst strength of schedule for the running back position this season. However, they do have the 3rd best offensive line. Tony Pollard's 2020 projection is RB50, right in line with his price tag. Very consistent. Total Foresight actually likes him right now a little bit better at RB37. Okay, just outside an RB3, so you're on that RB3/flex area. His fantasy points per game, we have 1 year under the books for him, and he was RB61 as a rookie. Okay, he did miss one game, but he did log 72 carries for 395 yards. That's a fair amount of carries for a rookie that we didn't get to see much of, so it is a decent sample size, and he was able to accumulate a 5.5 yards per carry average and get in the end zone twice. So really a nice little start for the rookie, and especially a guy who's going to get limited opportunities. He did also add 14 catches on 18 targets for 102 yards and a score. I mean, that's almost Saquon Barkley level receiving right there in one game, in one start. So, thank you. His notable 2019 stat ranks, he actually did have one. Who knew? He was RB23 and RB1 percentage. What?
Yeah.
How in the world? He finished as an RB1 3 times in weeks 3, 11, and 15. Wow, that is crazy. Okay.
If I had to guess, those are all 3 of his touchdowns.
Yeah, that's that. Hey, that always helps everybody in fantasy, right? Got to get in the end zone. His notable 2019 next-gen stats. He was actually, get this, the 5th most efficient north-south runner. Now, I made fun of Saquon when we talked about Zeke. Zeke was the 7th most efficient north-south runner, and Tony Pollard was the 5th most efficient north-south runner. How about that for a stat? He was also 3rd in yards per attempt. I mean, those are some notable stats, Ben.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving on. How about some notable stats from Player Profiler? He was number 9 in big run rate. He was number 9 in production premium. He was number 5 in yards created per touch. And he was number 4 in true yards per carry. Those are elite stats, guys, for a guy who's going as RB 49 overall in the middle of the 10th round and who is a handcuff to one of the elite running backs behind one of the elite lines in this league. Unless you consider Kareem Hunt in this category, then Tony Pollard is the number 1 undisputed best handcuff in fantasy football. His metrics definitely get your attention.
So, gentlemen, as you know, in our league of record, Ezekiel Elliott is a player that I'll be keeping. So, obviously, given everything with this offseason with COVID, I've given a lot of thought to where would I actually reach to in order to get Tony Pollard. And that's also got me thinking about, how valuable do I see him being if Zeke's out 2 to 3 weeks versus if Zeke, God forbid he tears an ACL in week 4 and he's gone for the year versus 2 to 3 weeks. In the 2 to 3 week scenario, I love Tony Pollard. I think that he would step in and be an instant RB1 week to week in that offense behind that line. This is a little peek behind the curtain, sort of a strategy thing for our listeners out there. In the latter scenario, though, if Zeke were to have a catastrophic injury and there's going to be significant time left, my advice would be go get Tony Pollard's backup, because the man has never carried any type of a relevant workload in college, and he still hasn't as a pro.
Interesting.
He's been able to come in and smash late in games for Dallas when they're just salting away the game in a blowout, and he's put up some nice stats. But I wouldn't want to rely on him for rest of season. So just throwing that out there, because it's something I've thought about. It's like if Zeke went down early, my most important waiver pickup would be, okay, who's the guy behind Pollard? Because when you're in that offense behind that line, whoever's back there will give you some kind of production on a week-to-week basis.
Hey, Steve, I'm taking him in the 7th round.
You're a turd.
Ben, are you going to go 6th? Do I hear 6th? Anybody want to
No.
Come on.
Because I'm throwing around mature name calling right now.
Press.
calling you a doo-doo head, Jay.
Well, I mean, in the category of handcuffs, there are none better in football than Tony Pollard. You make a good point, Steve, about it being unclear whether or not he would be able to, if the worst happened to Zeke and he missed the rest of the season from week 4 on, I think we can all agree that Tony Pollard would get an opportunity to take over that backfield. Now, would he be able to do it? I'm not sure. So, you make a great point about your strategic thought process with how far you would reach on Tony Pollard and making sure that you would identify Tony Pollard's backup in the event that Zeke went down. But Zeke is extremely durable, and we all know that Zeke has asymptomatically been diagnosed with COVID. So I see Zeke as durable as ever heading into this season. And that's why I can understand, like, Antonio Gibson has a little bit probably easier path to a workhorse role, albeit Tony Pollard is in a much better offense in a situation. So these are all the splitting hairs and the pros and cons once you get to this level in the draft. But it's all about what you need. And if you're a Zeke, somebody who got Zeke early on, you need to do everything you can to make sure that you handcuff him.
I'm very disappointed in you, Ben, right now. We had a clear opportunity to apply some pressure to Steve in our league draft. Listen, Zeke's been healthy. We've noted it so many times. We've jinxed it.
Time out.
He's probably going to go down with injury.
Snipe him. I'm not going to snipe him in the 6th round because you and even crazier people that are in our league of record are going to take care of it for me. I'm not even going to have to worry about it.
But you got to tell Steve you're going to just to apply that. Maybe he'll take him in the 5th round.
Steve knows who will snipe him just to snipe him.
I don't even know if Steve has a 5th rounder. Does Steve have a 5th rounder?
And hey, just for the record, as far how I do view Tony Pollard, and Ben, you made a great point. Like, Zeke has already had, COVID, and I don't view that as much of a risk and I don't think that Zeke is going to probably get injured. And there's a very good chance that in some of these backfields, we shouldn't try so desperately to handcuff against COVID because there's a good chance that the whole backfield could end up with it, and they have to bring someone in off the streets. So
it could be right, Steve.
So it's like don't overdraft on a guy and hang on to him all season, clogging up a bench spot because you fear COVID.
Save that fab.
Exactly. So at least that's the approach I'm taking this season.
All right,
Yep. Interesting. I was going to say, even at the end of this division, it's pretty interesting at the running back position.
Yeah.
We've only got 2 running backs left before we move on to the quarterbacks. And I got to be honest, I was surprised to see how intriguing all of their numbers were. Next up in order of ADP, you've got Philadelphia Eagles running back Boston Scott. He's currently going as RB52 at the 1107 behind Darrell Henderson, Duke Johnson, and in front of Justin Jackson and Nyheim Hines. I mean, you want to talk about just total dart throw city, other than maybe Duke Johnson. That could be a decent value. We'll see what Bill O'Brien's doing down there in Houston, but I digress. Back to Boston Scott. The Philadelphia Eagles, as we said, have the 23rd ranked strength of schedule for the running back position. For a defined pass catcher like Boston Scott, that doesn't worry me nearly as much, and he still gets the benefit from that 10th best offensive line. His current projection is RB48, a little bit ahead of that RB52 price tag. We don't have him ranked yet, but we will very soon. He did finish his RB57 in fantasy points per game. And he wasn't really involved until later in the season, so he had limited volume, 42 attempts, 191 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He went 20 for 20 as far as receptions and targets goes, and he added 120 yards receiving at a 6 yard per reception average. Didn't get any touchdowns through the air, and I think it would be very easy for that to improve this year because he's the defined certain number 2 behind Miles Sanders. His only notable stats from 2019 as far as stat ranks or next gen stats or playerprofiler.com goes, it comes from Player Profiler. He was number 6 in production premium, which we outlined earlier on this episode with Darius Geis. And I will say from weeks 14 to 17, once the 1-2 punch of Sanders and Scott had been defined, Boston Scott was 5th overall in the NFL in running back targets with 25. And he was PPR RB7 overall in that span as well, RB7. Now, I will acknowledge the fact that this man had 3 touchdowns in RB17 that highly inflated that. So what did I do? I took away those 18 fantasy points that he got from those 3 touchdowns, and I wanted to see where he would have ranked in that same span. He did go down, but from RB7 to RB14. Thus, I say Boston Scott is a sneaky value in PPR formats in 2020.
I absolutely love the call, Benny. When going through everything with the Philadelphia Eagles and seeing, in week 17, 4 receptions, week 16, 6, 15, 7, 14, 6. I mean, that's 23 receptions that he bags in the last quarter of the season. And, in PPR, that definitely adds up to a lot. And that's with Miles Sanders on the field doing some of his thing as well. Yep. And one of the biggest things for me, and we go back to it, this is a team that, again, I understand they added to their defense, but they did tie for the league lead in plays per game. So a higher volume offense. And Jalen Reagor, love the talent, isn't going to get to any kind of an offseason. Alshon Jeffrey, headed for the pup to start the year. Deshaun Jackson might not be on the roster. Who do they have to throw the ball to? Like, they're going to use, and Carson Wentz will do so. We'll talk about him here in a little bit, but he'll utilize the weapons he has. So as far as like a guy who, and to a certain degree, he is a handcuff to Miles Sanders. So more and more when I look into him and that whole offense, like I like it. It's a small sample size, but I like it, especially at that cheap price tag.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Steve. He wasn't a guy. Honestly, this podcast has really put him more on my radar. I mean, I liked him as a player in Philly last year, and I thought, okay, they were down bodies all over the place. But to your point, Steve, they may still be a little bit. So, but he at least seems to have standalone value heading into the season, much more so than the guys being drafted around him, and he has that cuff potential too. So, if you're drafting guys and you need a running back in this spot, especially compared to the guys going around him in drafts, I really like Boston Scott and the value he presents. All right, wrapping up the running back position, a guy we mentioned a little bit, old man Adrian Peterson, still being drafted. Look at this, as RB64 in the 14th round.
Matches his age.
I
love you. I love you, AP.
Going behind Raquel Armistead and Darrington Evans, and in front of Gio Bernard and Rashad Penny. The Skins, I'm sorry, nope, that's not right.
The Washington Dysfunctions.
The Dysfunctions have the 9th best strength of schedule for running backs heading into the season, and the 29th ranked offensive line. An interesting combination for AP. His 2020 projection, RB58, not too far off from his price tag. Actually presents a little bit of value if you want to take it straight by the numbers. His total Foresight rank has him ranked as RB33 because he always seems to somehow come in and just produce and just blow everybody away with how the guy still got it. Will he do it again in 2020? Foresight says there's a chance. His finishes over the last 3 seasons, he was RB50, then RB24, then RB42, all ahead of his current price tag. Last season, he didn't miss a game. He had 198 rushing attempts for 820 yards for which was an average of over 4 yards per carry, which is very impressive, and he did get in the end zone 5 times. He also added 16 catches on 19 targets. Pretty decent catch rate there for 142 yards for almost a 9 yards per reception average. Didn't get in the end zone there, though. Some notable stats from last year. He was tied for 23rd in RB2 percentage. He was 14th of runs of greater than 20 yards. He had 5 runs over 20 yards. He was 23rd in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. He was an RB2 in consistency during the stretch run in fantasy football. And he was RB16 in fantasy points from weeks 13 to 16. Again, rock solid, if not a higher end RB2 during the fantasy playoffs. Some other notable stats. He was number 8 in big...
Some mind-blowing stats from playerprofiler.com.
All right, here we go. Let's dig in. I gotta... Ready? All right. Number 8 in big runs. Number 14 in big run rate. Number 11 in evaded tackles?
Number 11 in evaded tackles.
How is that possible? Oh, good for you, man.
Well, they didn't block anybody.
He got out of the way, though. Giving me some hope. All right. And you know, so obviously he had to be high in juke rate, right? How about number 2 in juke rate? I gotta start doing some yoga or something, or some plyometrics. Good Lord. All right. He was also number 13 in yards created with 376, and number 18 in goal line carries. Sorry, Steve, with 7. Man, talk about the ageless wonder. Look at those 2019 player profiler stats. He's the biggest. Wait. Here's the biggest thing that concerns me about Oh, sorry. No, you're right. You wrote that right. I just can't read, Ben. He is the biggest thing that concerns me about Antonio Gibson in 2020. AP said he wants to play another 4. He wants to play another 4. How old is he going to be in 4 years?
Hey,
50 years old?
If anybody can do it, it can be the man, the myth, the legend.
And not only
he's
that,
on the TB12 diet.
That's right.
Apparently. Not only does he want to play 4 more years, this is a contract year for him. So he's motivated on top of that. He wants to get paid again.
Steve.
He wants to get that senior citizen contract.
Good Lord. He wants that going right into his Roth IRA.
Number 2 in juke rate, Steve. Put some respect on his name, man.
I love you, AP. You just finish up, Jay.
Okay, if nothing else, those player profiler stats prove that AP has still got it to a certain degree. If Ron Rivera sees that firsthand, it wouldn't shock me to see him show respect to the future Hall of Famer in the form of significant carries.
And to that point, and I alluded to it earlier when I was talking about Washington in their backfield, and that I do think that, it will be someone like an AP who kind of carries that load early on. If you're rolling with a 0 running back strategy, whether you were targeting doing that or you were forced to because of all the running backs getting gobbled up and you just had to take the wide receiver tight end talent and it just works out that way, your focus needs to be get guys who will get carries early in the season and just fill that position and load up on your rolls of the dice and do what you got to do. And is in the 14th round, a guy who very well could be starting at running back for his team. And he did lead the Washington Redskins, albeit they were low.
Washington dysfunction.
I'm sorry. In my blog, I just call him Washington. But yeah, for Washington, he led them in every category in the red zone and goal line, as you would imagine. So he's a guy that in the 14th round, it seems so boring. And I'm just, I'm poking fun a little bit, but in all seriousness, like there was value there. I mean, the guy ran for 820 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he's barely being drafted. So, that it's disrespectful. He's worth drafting, and especially if you're in a zero running back strategy, he should be on your roster, at least to start the season.
Yeah. He and Carlos Hyde are 2 of the best late round draft values at the running back position this year. Because like you said, Steve, they're both going to be guaranteed week 1 starters. Yeah. And I'll be honest, it has been a long time in my research since my expectations were so far off reality. I didn't pay attention to what AP did last season.
Yeah.
I didn't think AP over there in Washington mattered at all in fantasy football anymore. But number 2 in juke rate, 11 in evaded tackles, 13th in yards created, RB 16 in fantasy points from weeks 13 to 16.
Hey,
the man just needs touches and he can still get it done.
Hey, you mean to throw you a stat?
Go ahead.
Adrian Peterson finished within 100 rushing yards of Saquon Barkley. Let that sink in. Let that sink in for a minute.
In 3 more games, get yourself out of here.
Still the truth. It's still the truth.
Yes, it is. And 3 more games. Yes, you're right, Jay. It is truthful. All right.
Things come
I
back to
appreciate. Oh, for Jay, they do anyways, man. So,
when Saquon gets enshrined in Canton, I'm gonna have to go. So if you guys want to go with me, I'll be front row.
Our luck, there's going to be one NFL player in all of the NFL players that ever notices this podcast, and it's going to be Saquon, and we're never going to get any attention, and it's going to be all your fault.
And he's going to invite us to his Hall of Fame induction and put us front row just so we can watch him.
Yes, because we matter so much.
We do.
So that rounds out the running backs of this exciting division in the NFC East. And we have got 4 quarterbacks to cover that are very interesting as well. And when it comes to ADP, it starts with Dallas Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. He's currently going as QB5 at the 604 behind Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and ahead of Deshaun Watson and Drew Brees. For quarterbacks, Dallas has the 6th ranked strength of schedule for the quarterback position. And just like his running backs, he benefits from the 3rd best offensive line in the game. His projection currently is QB3 overall, and Total Foresight likes him as QB5. As far as fantasy points per game goes over the last 3 years, Dak has been QB5, QB18, and QB12. He did not miss a game in 2019 despite a shoulder injury to a throwing shoulder injury that he played through and gutted out through the last several weeks of the season. He had 365 attempts he had 365 completions on 563 attempts for almost 65% completion, 1 yard shy of 4,600 passing yards, 8.2 yards per attempt, 26 passing touchdowns to only 11 interceptions. As always, he brings you a little bit of that rushing upside as well. Didn't quite have the rushing touchdowns that he's had in previous years. Only had 3 rushing touchdowns on 49 attempts for 242 yards. Still almost a 5-yard per carry average. So, a very effective runner. I think towards the end of the year when he was dealing with that shoulder injury, he was very hesitant to run. So that probably limited his rushing upside, both in yardage and potentially touchdowns a little bit, as with the passing as well. So keeping offensive coordinator Kellen Moore will certainly help things. And, being healthy will certainly help things for him as well. His notable stat ranks and his next-gen stats and his player profiler stats are off the charts, man. QB3 overall, QB5 in fantasy points per game, 7th in QB1 percentage, 6th in consistency, 6th in attempts, 5th in completions, 2nd in pass attempts, 7th in yards per attempts, 5th in passing touchdowns, 9th in rush yards, 7th in rush TDs. And again, like I said, he was hampered by an injury to his throwing shoulder for several weeks there. As far as next-gen notable stats go, 7th most time to throw, benefiting from that outstanding offensive line. 3rd in average completed air yards, and all they did was add CeeDee Lamb. 10th in highest passer rating, 6th in percentage of completions above expectation. Player profiler notable stats, 18th in red zone attempts, 5th in deep attempts, 2nd in air yards and air distance, 6th in money throws, 6th in red zone carries, 10th in true passer rating, 8th in true completion rate, and 2nd in deep ball completion percentage. Dak playing on a 1-year franchise tag will ensure his ultimate motivation. And like I said, just because Mike McCarthy is coming to town doesn't mean that there's going to be some big change on offense, because they retained offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, which will ensure offensive continuity overall. Dak finished as QB3 overall in 2019. Despite that injury, because it's on his throwing shoulder. It's not an ankle. It's not a non-throwing shoulder injury. It is his throwing shoulder. So the fact that he was able to gut through that and still finish as QB3 overall really gets my attention. And I absolutely expect him to return value on his QB5 price tag in 2020.
I mean, certainly Dak Prescott's an exciting fantasy option heading into the 2020 season. And Ben, you touched on a lot of the reason why that would be the case, and it's hard to argue against. And I would say I don't have an. It's not even that I'm arguing against it. I just want to present, hey, this is what happened last season from the red zone perspective. And you mentioned it, 18th in red zone attempts. That for somebody who was in the top 6 in pass attempts, that's because we call the red zone the Zeke zone. So, and I don't think that's going to change. It just, it does limit his touchdown upside a little bit. And then we talked about it earlier. Dallas's defense could take a major step from already being a good defense. So there's going to be games where Dak wins you the week. I have zero doubt about that in 2020. There's going to be games where he's probably scores you, depending on your scoring format, 30 to 40 points. He'll be elite. But I'll say there will be weeks where it's just not necessary because of that offense. So, I just want to say, hey, to anyone thinking about if you're going to reach on Dak because you're just thinking of all that upside of those elite performances, just understand there's going to be weeks where you're still going to want to maybe avoid him because of a possible matchup. To whereas there's probably some other guys where, like I think of a Matt Ryan at a much cheaper price, where I don't think there's a single matchup where I wouldn't want to just roll Matt Ryan out because they're going to throw the ball 40 times a game.
Steve, I think you absolutely nailed it. It seems like Dak is a very hot commodity in drafts almost across the board. It really doesn't matter the format. His price tag is increasing in drafts. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, but I just stay away, to be honest with you. And Ben reads all of these incredible stats where he's top 5, top 7, and just about everything across the board except consistency. Just to your point, Steve, even though he's going as QB5 and he's top 5 or top 7 in most legitimate statistical categories, he was 13th in consistency down the stretch. He was 13th in Foresight consistency. That's QB2 level, to be honest with you guys. There were 12 starting quarterbers. What's that?
While injured. While battling through an injury on his shoulder.
Okay, fair enough. But, it's just, there's just something about it that I just don't like.
And that's fair, too. Both what you and Steve said is completely fair. However, I am trying to be very narrowly focused when it comes to 2020. And when I agree with you, number one, Steve, I am just a subscriber to later round quarterbacks just because for all the ADP studies we've done, for all of the stats that are out there, we all subscribe to except Jay, subscribe to late round quarterbacks in single QB leagues.
I got to take what drafts give me, Ben. Get off my back. God.
I love it. When you look at 2020 in a vacuum,
something.
Of course, Russell Wilson is somebody with that, the declining defense. Russell Wilson is somebody that is very exciting heading into 2020. Kyler Murray, we've discussed. We have our concerns about Kyler Murray, even though DeAndre Hopkins is now available to him as his wide receiver 1. Deshaun Watson, what's he going to be without DeAndre Hopkins to help him combat Bill O'Brien? We don't know. I love Deshaun Watson, but I just don't know without DeAndre, plus still having to deal with Bill O'Brien. I just don't know. Drew Brees, super old, super accurate last year. I don't know. I'm waiting on quarterback altogether, but if you're going to make me rank the guys in this group, Dak's probably number 2 for me behind Russell Wilson.
I'm starting to get a migraine looking at these quarterback ADPs. Okay.
Kyler Murray is.
What are we doing, Steve?
I don't get that, but you're right, Ben. It all goes back to unless somebody like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes falls to it a value where you're like, well, I simply can't really pass this up. Then fine, but it's just kind of like after that.
Yeah,
it just seems like reaching, and that's I guess my point towards Dak is I don't doubt he could very well finish as QB 2 or 3 this year, But, the road that gets you there, it depends on what weeks he hits and doesn't. And I honestly don't know his schedule off the top of my head. Not that it matters probably for the fantasy playoffs this early on. But yeah, it's like, just wait. But
I completely agree with you guys. And as QB5, at that price tag with the guys going around him, fine. Perfectly appropriate. But I'm with you. It's just an awkward phase. It's an awkward stage in drafts where the elite guys have gone. And unless you're in, a super flex, 2-quarterback league, something like that, where quarterbacks are continuing to fall off the board, fine. But I'm never going to take a quarterback in that, 4 to 6, 4 to 7 round range in drafts. It's just blah. No, thank you. I'll wait till later, just like you guys said.
Or you'll go in the second or third.
Well, that's if I'm getting an elite guy. Otherwise, I'm not going to take a quarterback here. But yeah, fair. Man, okay, listen. I have some hesitancy taking Dak, especially at this point in drafts. But what are we doing with Kyler Murray as QB4?
I know.
Okay.
We'll see. Yeah, listen, every year we've done our studies, man. Every year there's several busts. I mean, we see this one coming from a mile away at the QB4 price tag.
There's one coming up next. It's just not going to help. I need some Tylenol or something. So next up we've got Carson Wentz. Okay.
Be happy, man. This is a good row.
No. Just wait. Carson Wentz is going in as QB2 right now in drafts in the latter part of the 9th round. Perfectly fine. You want to take a quarterback in the 9th round? More power to you. Carson Wentz, great quarterback as long as he can stay healthy. Going in front of him, Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen. Okay. Is there a premium on rushing yards in your league or rushing touchdowns in your league? Do you need a quarterback who can complete more than 50% of his passes? Carson Wentz can. Can Josh Allen? Don't know. Not sure about that. Okay, going behind him, Matt Stafford, Cam Newton. Fine, very interesting. Matthew Stafford can obviously be prolific. Cam Newton is the darling who's going to apparently, lead New England to more Super Bowls. Who knows? All right, back to Carson Wentz. Let's focus on him. Strength of schedule this year for the Philadelphia Eagles quarterback is 10th out of 32 teams. Offensive line, 10th out of 32 teams. You love seeing that, both in the top third of the league. His projection this year, quarterback 12. Hey, that's right where he's being drafted. Right on the money. Total Foresight likes him actually a tick better at QB 8, so more of a solid QB 1. So we'll call him a back-end QB 1 with upside. How about that? So far in his career, his 3 finishes, QB 3, QB 15, and QB 13. Now, he has had some injury issues, has he not? Yes. Last year, though, didn't miss a game, gutted through it. His completion percentage was over 64%. He was a tick under 4,000 total passing yards, though, with a 6.6 yards per attempt average. Not the best, and we've talked about his much maligned weapons that he had just due to injury and everything else last season. He did, though, even with the challenges, had 26 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. That ratio is perfectly fine. He did have 59 rushing attempts for 228 yards. Gave you a little bit on the ground, even factoring in those sacks, and did get in the end zone once on the ground. So good for you, Carson. I like it. Take that, Josh Allen. All right, moving on. How about some notable 2019 stat ranks? He was QB 10 overall. How about that? Going as QB 12 now. He was QB 13 in fantasy points per game, 9th in QB 1 percentage, 12th in consistency, 9th in consistency from weeks 10 to 16. Love that. 10th in Foresight consistency, 4th in pass attempts and completions, 10th in passing yards, 5th in passing touchdowns, even with nobody catching the ball. What? All right, 7th in rushing attempts and 11th in rushing yards. All right, love it. Some value there, it seems. Some more notable next-gen stats. He had the 10th least time to throw. All right? Think about that with all the stats I just read you. He was top 12 in pretty much every statistical category with the 10th least amount of time to throw. And he also coupled that with the 14th highest passer rating. You know what that means? That means accuracy. You know who doesn't have accuracy? The guy being drafted right in front of him in drafts, Josh Allen. You guys know him, guys? You keeping up? Am I keeping you awake? All right.
Like Josh Allen.
Jay's favorite players, Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley. We've learned a lot in this episode.
Add him to the list. All right. Some notable 2019 stats from Player Profiler. Carson Wentz was number 5 in pass attempts, number 7 in red zone attempts, number 10 in deep attempts. Man, dude, the guy's throwing it all over the field. He was number 9 in air yards, number 7 in attempted distance, number 8 in money throws, my favorite statistical category, and then number 8 in red zone carries, and number 5th in accuracy. Like, you're hearing those numbers, and he's being drafted QB 12. You're seeing a QB1 with some upside here, right? The bottom line is that if he stays healthy, he's proven to be a solid QB1. He made it through the entire fantasy season before a blow to the head knocked him out of his first playoff appearance with a concussion. With a defined and dynamic backfield of Sanders and Scott, plus the addition of first-round wide receiver Jalen Reagor, Wentz is a solid value at QB2, especially since we just talked about some of these guys going in the 5th and 6th round, and he's going in the 9th round.
Yeah, and Jay, when we want to look at his red zone accuracy, he actually comes in 9th in completion percentage, which it's funny, like when you show me he had the 10th least time to throw, that's actually really impressive, guys, because, you know, we just talked about Dak Prescott. He was 20. Yes, he was 24th in completion percentage in the red zone. So a vast disparity between the two guys. And more impressively, when it comes to Carson Wentz, he threw 19 red zone touchdowns, which tied for 3rd in the NFL. And when I say what makes that impressive is, let's bear in mind, you know, he was utilizing Boston Scott for 23 receptions in the last 4 games. Jeffrey was out. Obviously, it's 2 stud tight ends, and you guys are going to talk a lot about them this Saturday, I'm sure. But, you know, I look at it this way when it comes to Carson Wentz. You talk about a possible value. If he's healthy, if they do retain Deshaun Jackson, he does manage to suit up and be healthy and play any kind of football. When they do get Alshon Jeffrey back, they will have Zach Ertz. They will have Dallas Goedert. They will have Miles Sanders, and they will have Boston Scott. He's got, you know, some decent weapons around him. And, you know, it's a team, like I keep saying, they tied with Baltimore for the most plays run per game in the NFL. There's a lot to like there. You saw what he did with very limited resources last season. It was very impressive.
Hey, Ben, you know what Carson Wentz and Josh Allen have in common?
What's that, Jay?
They're both they're both top 9 in intended air yards. You know what they don't have in common? Do you want to take
accuracy?
Do you want to take a guess? One of them actually completed those passes.
Jay, I just want to apologize to you briefly because clearly on last Wednesday's episode, we did not give you enough time to just destroy Josh Allen because you've been carrying this for an entire week. And you just needed some more. We're all with you over here. We would take Carson Wentz over Josh Allen.
That's what it is, man. I'm sitting here looking at Kyler Murray going in front of Dak, and then I turn around and I see Josh Allen and going in front of Carson Wentz, and that was it. That was it, man. I've lost it.
We're gonna go tangible and intangible real quick with my assessment before we move on to Danny Dimes. I want to make one distinct comparison. I don't know what the exact rank is, and I am going to pull that up in just a minute, but 6.6 yards per attempt for a quarterback is very low. It is certainly not up there whatsoever with the highest yards per attempt in the league. And as a matter of fact, right now, okay, Carson Wentz at 6.6 yards per attempt from weeks 1 through 16 in 2019. He was tied for 35th in yards per attempt at 6.6. And when you compare that, Jay, real quick, to being, he was 10th in deep attempts, 7th in attempted distance. His money throws were on point. His accuracy was on point. His touchdown to interception ratio was on point. Can you just imagine for 1 minute, just imagine, in addition to Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, imagine if Jalen Reagor pans out a little bit. Imagine if Alshon Jeffrey's fully healthy. Imagine if Deshaun Jackson's fully healthy. What can Carson Wentz do then? I mean, give this man some deep threats and watch him go to work.
Yeah, Josh Allen's yards per attempt was 6.8, just for comparison. I'm just saying.
We're unanimous, brother. We're taking Carson over Josh. It's okay.
All right, let's go with Danny Dimes.
We
may disagree here. I don't know. We'll see.
We will see. We will see. As far as Danny Dimes goes, New York Giants quarterback. He was a rookie last season. He's currently going as QB 15 in the 11th, behind Matt Stafford, behind Cam Newton, in front of Big Ben and Baker Mayfield. The New York Giants quarterback has a middle-of-the-road 16th ranked strength of schedule. He has the 20th ranked Daniel Jones offensive line in all of the NFL. His projection is currently QB 16, a touch behind his draft price of QB 15. He was actually QB 14 in fantasy points per game in 2019 in his rookie campaign. Very surprised about that. He did miss 3 games. He had over 62% accuracy, over 2,700 pass yards. He was just like Carson Wentz, though, in that yards per attempt, just like Carson Wentz. Doesn't really have a deep threat either. Check this out, though. As a rookie, 23 pass touchdowns to 11 interceptions, guys.
Hey, not bad.
And did you know he was a threat on the ground? 6 yards per carry, 42 attempts for 253 yards, added 2 more rushing touchdowns.
Hey.
So that's 25 total touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Had a little bit of fumble problems, but we won't go into that. Notable stat ranks in 2019. He was QB 8 in consistency from week 8 on. That was shocking to me. He was 8th in Foresight consistency, 13th in pass touchdowns, 7th in rush yards, and 13th in rush touchdowns. As far as next-gen stats, he had the 13th most time to throw, which outperforms that current offensive line rank of 20th, so hopefully that sustains. He was 3rd highest in aggressive throw percentage. You love seeing that out of a rookie. And 3rd highest aggressive throw, and yet 23 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Pretty decent quarterback you got there. And as far as playerprofiler.com, he was number 11 in production premium. Remember, we talked about that in similar type scenarios with other guys. He performed better than the average full-time starter in those scenarios, and he was number 11 in that metric. Everyone thought it was funny when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones as a first-round pick last year. But after his rookie season, no one's laughing anymore. The pros for Danny Dimes are that I expect him to take a step and improve his 62% accuracy. Plus, he has an outstanding supporting cast on offense. The biggest con for Daniel Jones heading into 2020 is new offensive coordinator Jason Garrett, who hasn't called plays in almost 10 years. And it's noteworthy that the offense in Dallas took great strides as far as passing production goes after he stopped calling plays. Thus, I prefer 3 of the 4 quarterbacks going around him, but in a 2-quarterback league, Danny Dimes is a solid target.
So I want to start off by saying that Daniel Jones, by less than 1 percentile, was better in completion percentage than Dak Prescott in the red zone. Just going back to his fellow divisional foe. But so what I think to some degree helped Daniel Jones as far as being like a fantasy usable player, especially in his second half of his rookie season, was some of the reason why Jason Garrett is now their offensive coordinator. Is I was shocked to see that the New York Giants passed the ball 64.2% of their offensive plays. which was third in the NFL with Saquon Barkley as your running back and a rookie quarterback with limited wide receiver options because they're injured. So, I think it still can work out fine for Daniel Jones from a fantasy outlook with a reduced passing volume, just having that balance. I think the whole Giants offense in general should be better, at least for real life football, having Garrett there, because the play calling is, I still can't wrap my head around it. So far in all the research I've done, it was one of the more stunning things that I saw, because it just, to me, it makes no sense. But Ben, some of those stats you threw out there, though, I was not aware about Daniel Jones. I knew he had a couple rushing touchdowns. I did not realize that he ran for 240 on the ground, averaged 6 yards per carry. If it wasn't for the fact what he is, Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, and the Rams to start the year, he'd be so attractive as a late round quarterback. But folks, you just got to keep him on your radar, see how things are progressing early in the season. And he's somebody I'm sure you can probably pick up on the cheap or the free and roll with him later on. So
here's the tale of stats. Let me paint a picture. Ben chose these stats to say, look at how much of an asset he can be on the ground. 42 attempts for 253 yards and 2 scores. And he was third highest aggressive throw percentage. I mean, seeing aggressive play out of a rookie quarterback's fantastic. Here's what Foresight J sees. I see a guy running for his life, and you can be very motivated when your life is on the line, trying to get away from guys trying to destroy you, and then making unwise decisions, throwing the ball in way too tight of windows, being way too aggressive as a rookie. Are you with me?
I am interacting with some people on social media right now who are tuning in live to this podcast, which we appreciate. For me, I think it comes down to two things. He's going into his second season. Defenses have a year of film on him. It may be a little bit tougher sledding. Plus, in this very unique offseason, he's having to change offensive schemes. Like Steve said, Garrett is very good about running the ball a lot more. All of these things to me spell that it could prevent him from maybe taking a step. I think we might get similar performances from him like we got last year, which wasn't bad at all. But I think some people are expecting and hoping him to take a step, and I just think there's a couple of factors that might prevent that. That being said, he's going pretty late too.
As much as we've joked about Josh Allen and Saquon, maybe we should crush Jason Garrett a little bit more. Do we need to save some time for that? All right. Let's wrap this up.
Hey. Yeah. Really quick, though, before we move on, it is worth saying, I do want to be on record on this podcast of saying...
It is live and we're recording, so let's do this.
Yes. When it does come to Daniel Jones, and this is what I wrote about this week, was you did see a guy who got no favors from the play calling, was put in a really tough position. The Giants are definitely upgrading their offensive line this upseason, but it wasn't so much last year. And he didn't have a lot of help as far as having consistent – I mean, he's a rookie quarterback. Give him consistency in the starting lineup with his receivers, and I think that's probably why you saw some, favoritism towards Darius Slayton later on in the year. So I do just want to say, like you said, Ben, we all made fun of the draft pick. We shouldn't have. He was put in the New York media to boot. So, hey, the kid was thrown into the fire, and he did he did the best that he could do. And from a fantasy output, had some very excellent games last season.
Yep. I can't disagree with that. I mean, like you said, he was thrown into the Wolves' den and actually made it out alive. So good for him. Somebody who didn't have quite as good of a rookie season, even though, we're hoping for a big bounce out. Let me just take a moment to call it right now. Comeback Player of the Year, Dwayne Haskins is next up on our list. Currently going undrafted. What's wrong with you people? Come on, man. Haven't you seen the videos on Twitter? The guy's working his rear end off.
To be comeback player of the year, you have to be something and then fall off and then come back.
No, Steve, you got it all wrong.
He could be breakout player of the year, but I don't even see that.
Okay, all right, fine,
happening.
Fair enough. One way or another, he's getting a trophy. All right. Strength of schedule by position. Dwayne Haskins and the Dysfunctionals team has the third best strength of schedule for the quarterback position, even though he has a 29th ranked offensive line. Not a good combination. His 2020 projection is QB 29. Total Foresight likes him as QB 20.
I knew you were going to get excited about this.
God, if I didn't have glass mugs here, I would smack them off the desk.
What has gotten into you tonight?
Come on, man.
You're a psycho.
QB 20, guys. Trust Total Foresight. Get on board. Get on the board.
I do trust Total Foresight. QB 20 is nothing to get excited about, brother.
And he's that high? He's that high?
That's a QB 2. That's a Q. Listen. There's plenty of room.
There's no Buckeye bias on Jay's part whatsoever.
There's plenty of room on the bandwagon. I'm all alone. Come on and join me.
Yes, you are alone.
All right. Last year in fantasy points per game, he was an impressive QB 41. I did not know that many quarterbacks played last year.
Reality comes at you fast, Jay.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, now listen. He did miss 6 games. Saquon missed 3, and that discounts everything. But okay, whatever. He had a 58% completion percentage. Okay, here you go. 6.7 yards per attempt. Better than Josh Allen. How about that? No, actually better than Carson Wentz. Whatever. Moving on. He did add 101 yards on the ground, so take that, Daniel Jones. Let's see. Notable stats. Not a long list. He had the 9th most time to throw. He was 12th in completed air yards. Huh? Yeah. Completed. That's impressive. And he did have the 2nd highest aggressive throw percentage, so even better than Danny Dimes in that stat category. I like it. All right.
Who's his best comp, Jay?
His best comp was a guy who led the NFL in yards last season.
And interceptions.
Jameis Winston. Hey, he can be prolific. That's what I see. He had just 2 top 15 performances in 6 games last year. According to Ben's notes, seems like an uphill battle for the second-year quarterback, but he does have decent weapons, and Ron Rivera's impact on that organization will certainly be a positive one. We agree there, huh? Yeah. That said, he's going undrafted in single QB leagues for a good reason, according to Foresight Ben.
Yes, with the correct vantage point in this particular instance.
Listen, Dwayne gonna have a better sophomore year. Mark it down. I'm going on the record. It's live. We're recording.
Just start humming the fight song now.
It's in the archives. Better sophomore year. Like Ben always says, better things to come.
Well, Jay, I hate to inform you, but there wasn't anyone who had a worse completion percentage in the red zone. There really wasn't.
Listen,
completed
he plays
30
for team dysfunction. What do you guys expect from him?
I understand, but, that is my role on this podcast.
Danny Dimes was in a pretty tough spot last season, too.
Danny Dimes was thrown into the Wolves' den. Dwayne Haskins was thrown into the Wolves' den inside a volcano.
Get out of here. You and your Sharknado
All he had was a rookie. He had a running back who's 53 and a rookie wide receiver and a tight end who breaks when he sneezes. Like, what do you want from the guy?
Get out of here. Go ahead,
Get out of here.
So, but no, what I will say is this, and I wrote about it a little bit this week. When it comes to Dwayne Haskins, you're right, Jay. He was put into a very tough spot.
Thank you, Steve.
It didn't really seem like the coaching staff believed in him. They weren't on board and all in with him. So as much as coaching matters, especially for a young quarterback like Haskins, he's kind of thrown behind the 8 ball a bit. And
he was.
It hurt him last season. He was on a terrible offense, and it wasn't all his fault. And I am happy to see that, they did invest in bringing in, Gandy Golden, who's, big-bodied, awesome rookie wide receiver, should at least help his cause a little bit. You like to see Terry McLaurin out there, as a second-year wide receiver.
You do. Great receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do like that, Antonio Gibson, whatever his role is going to be, whether he's helping out in the backfield or just giving him another weapon or a dump off option, you like to see that they've invested a little bit offensively to give him a fighting chance. And I do think that Ron Rivera is going to be, and seems to be so far anyways, all in on giving Haskins like a fair chance. And I would like to see the kid get that and see what he could do. And the one thing that really does stink about this offseason, because I just, was talking about him being behind the 8 ball last year, I feel like he kind of is again this year because of the lack of preseason, the lack of an off season. And that is really, going to set him back this year. So,
before Ben jumps in to contradict everything, I feel like in my mind with our split screen format, we're on PTI and Steve just gave me 36 points. But go ahead, Ben. See if you can rack up enough.
Your opinion's valid, Jay, and I'm glad from your vantage point that's what it seems like to you. The one thing that we will agree on is that, relative to price tag, I have no problem with Dwayne Haskins. He's going undrafted. He's completely free. So if you are delusional about this man like Jay is, you go ahead and take your shot. You can cut him in week 1, not a big deal.
If you waited on quarterback and you're in a deep league and you have a super
there's still going to be 5 better options than Dwayne Haskins.
You need a starting quarterback?
Dude, this guy played in 9 games in 2019 and managed 7 touchdowns. No. There are better late round free quarterback options than Dwayne Haskins, and the list is not short.
All right, Jay, because you're just rolling tonight. Here, I got a bet for you. If you were willing to start Dwayne Haskins week 1 as your fantasy quarterback, he puts up QB1 numbers, I will dye my Washington burgundy for an entire month.
I might want you to bleach it. Will you bleach it?
Whatever you mean,
make
it clear,
Steve.
Whatever, yes. I'll do it.
Yes, because we want him taking Dwayne Haskins in our league of record. That is a win for us and everyone else.
You can use your last pick. He just, you just have to roll him out.
Sure. Yeah. I got to carry him on my bench. That's fine. Who does Washington play week 1?
Well, they're on the road against the revamped Philadelphia Eagles defense.
Yeah, it should be fine, Jay.
It should be fine.
On the road to Philly, you believe in your guy, Dwayne Haskins, right?
Yeah, they do.
He's going to shred your Eagles.
Give up passing yards. It is a divisional game, which never goes according to plan.
Well, we got to come up with terms for Jay if he fails.
I'm going to lose in our league of record. That's the punishment.
That's the punishment. He can start out 0-1.
Don't let him off so easy, Steve.
When Haskins gets him 4.5 points on the week.
Mahomes. Can we switch to a super flex league? No. Okay. Let me think about that. I'll answer you by the next podcast.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Fun episode, guys. Hey, I do want to throw out some exciting news. Fantasy Foresight is getting updates. They are being released. We have some already done. We have a revamped news and notes page where you can watch this podcast live as well as previous podcasts. You can also listen to the audio form if you're not in a place to watch. We have our Twitter feed and also some other information. And then we are working on revamping Total Foresight. So going through those changes right now. We always aim to have that information released and rolling by August 1st, and we will beat that this season. We will have it ready to go, hopefully by the end of this weekend. We do have our aggregate projections tab flowing as we speak. So, yes, good things going at Fantasy Foresight.
Love it. And then next Wednesday, we'll be back to discuss a whole new batch of quarterbacks and running backs. But first, Jay and I will be back with you Saturday morning, Steve notes in hand with the wide receivers and the tight ends of the NFC East. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.
Apparently.
I got the magic in me.
Yeah, Dwayne Haskins is going to look cute if he scores a touchdown in that game. It's the new best segment of this podcast.